welcome to the SheClicks webinar about turning content into fine art. I'm Angela Nicholson and I'm the founder of SheClicks. First, a word from our sponsor. This webinar is sponsored by PermaJet, a multi-award-winning brand committed to providing the best fine art and digital photo paper and canvas media. 19 years of extensive technical inkjet knowledge and their advanced free ICC profiling services are all provided to help amateurs and professionals alike produce that all-important perfect print for business or for pleasure. So thank you very much, PermaJet. Tonight's webinar is presented by Janet Haines, who is a photographic artist who pretty much grew up with a camera in her hands. Hi Janet, how are you?
Hi, thank you very much, Angela. I'm fine, and welcome to everybody here this evening. I don't know, have we got people from different time zones? Do you know?
We usually do, yes. I don't know specifically tonight, but we usually do get people from all around the world.
Okay, so if it's not good evening, it's good day, good morning, good afternoon, whatever it is, where you are.
So, Janet, actually, before we start, I mean, I don't know, this might be kind of jumping in on your presentation, but I had a couple of questions emailed to me, and I just thought it might be good to start, unless say it's going to eat into your some what you're going to present. Claire asked, how would you define fine art photography?
That's a very good question. The Royal Photographic Society debate this quite hard as well. What becomes fine art and what isn't? For me, it is something that takes an image to an artistic level rather than just being a record shot or even a very creative image in the way that it's been shot. But I think it's a bit open to debate, to be honest with you.
I think you're right. I think you're right. Anyway, if you'd like to make a start on your presentation, that'd be fantastic. Thank you.
Lovely. Well, thank you very much indeed. So first of all, I will screen share. Okay, so I am a member of the Royal Photographic Society, as you can see from there, but I'm also an ambassador for PermaJet. And as we go through tonight, what I'm going to hope to do is not only just tell you about my work and show you the sort of thing I do, but also talk a little bit about doing bodies of work and why that helps us to improve our performance as photographers, but also why I choose certain papers for certain images. Because again, you just asked me what's fine art. I actually believe that if you want to produce fine art, you've got to be a fine printer as well, because they go hand in hand. For me, an image is never complete until it's been printed, and it has to be printed on the best paper it can be printed on to give it that final little lift. And I think there's nothing better than seeing my print come out of my printer, and it just gives me a lot of pleasure. So I hope to impart some of that pleasure to you. So what do I mean by content? I don't shoot ordinary images anymore. Yes, I used to. I've done what goes in front of my lens for years. But in the last, I don't know, maybe 10 years or so, I've moved more into this art area. So now I don't care what is in the image, I'm shooting content. So for example, and I'll show you one in a moment, I can be somewhere and I can spot something that's fairly small and I just take a photograph of it. If you were with me as a photographer, you'd think, God, what the hell is she doing? It's really a crap photograph. But the reality is I'm not interested in all the other stuff, but I know I want an element of it. So it's just content and it goes into my library, which is very extensive, and somebody will ask me later, undoubtedly, how do I find things afterwards? And then I create my images, and that starts from an idea in my head. So instead of going out looking for my images to shoot, whether that's landscapes, whatever it is that takes your fancy, I actually do it, if you like, the other way round. So I start with the idea, and then I either shoot elements, which we'll come on to later, specifically to achieve that idea, or I just go through my library And maybe sometimes I come lucky and I've got everything that's already sitting there as content. So this is an example of, I want to just start with to show you the sort of thing that I will shoot. So a day out at the zoo, I might take some photographs of a flamingo, don't know what I'm going to do with them, stick them in the library, no problem. Same with the stairway in Paris. And here again, this was a fine example of shooting content. The bust that you see in the top here is in a hotel somewhere, and I was walking through the hotel and spotted it. Wallop, take the picture. Doesn't matter about all the other stuff around it. Doesn't even matter if, you know, if it needs to be, obviously needs to be sharp, but it doesn't matter about anything else very much indeed. And the textures, as you see down in the bottom left-hand corner, I take everywhere and anywhere on my iPhone, anywhere I spot a texture that appeals to me. And let's face it, there's textures all around us wherever we are. I just shoot it and put it into the library. And I've got probably well over 1,000 textures in my library. So all that just sits there. Then I come up with my idea. Now the idea for this particular one, and the reason I use this to show how I put things together, is because it's a particularly good one to show some odd things that you need to think about if you want to work in this sort of area. So the song Pretty Flamingo came to mind probably when I shot the flamingos, but I wanted to portray that photographically. So in the studio with the beautiful frayed owl, and you can see her down the bottom there, shot against a dappled background. As it happened, we were choosing to use that background on that particular day. And I know that I'm going to want to have her looking down that stairwell. So I've gone into the studio knowing what some of my component parts are and what I'm trying to achieve. So I have directed the model to look down her train so that we get the sweep going down the stairs. Error that I made, and you may spot it, is I've got her looking in the opposite direction to the sweep on the stairs. But never mind, that's just a very minor problem. There's the actual finished article. So you can see that I've flipped her. I also have flipped the flamingo and cut it out from amongst the others, quite obviously. And I've cut out the bust that was in the hotel. Now, this particular one I use when I decompose images to show people some of the things that you have to think about when you're putting together a montage. What we've got to try and aim to do is make it look believable, and yet it's still fantasy. So we have to obey the rules of physics, basically. So we know as photographers that there's a light source from the window up here, but we can also see from the light on these stairs that there's another light source off to my right-hand side. So I've got to keep all that light working on the various elements within the image so that it looks natural. So the first thing I've done with this particular one is change the colour of the stairwell, because you will remember that was quite a golden colour. And I know that I want my ultimate colours of this to be greys and the peachy flamingo, the peachy coloured flamingo. So it's important to me that I keep all that colour palette working together. So the first thing that gets put into the image is the model. I have to make sure that the scale is believable. It doesn't actually, and we'll come on to this later, it doesn't necessarily have to be totally to scale, but it has to look believable. For this particular one, I believe it probably is about to scale. If she put her hand down and put it on the rail, it's about where we would expect to see the rail if we ourselves were walking up that stairwell. So I've put my model in, I flipped her and I've put her in. I shoot in the studio with very flat lighting when I'm doing this type of work, because I can then add the shadows where I want to. And you'll note that down this side of her, I have in fact painted in shadows on a separate layer. I've made the shadows darker down here because there wouldn't have been much reflected light going on down there. However, at the top, the shading there is lighter because the wall, we know as photographers, the light will be bouncing off that wall and some of it will be coming back onto her and some of it will be coming back off the stairs onto her as well. So we have to think about what really happens with the light. Same with the sculpture here in the corner. I've had to paint in the shadows, and I've painted the shadows in darker in that very corner to make it look as if it's really nestling into the corner. It's things like that that if I don't put those shadows in, they look like pieces that have been cut out and stuck on. So I have to bed them into the picture and make them sit on their images, sit into the picture. And the best example of that is the flamingo down here. That had to be flipped because, again, it was a bright day when I was at the zoo, very highly lit on the edge of the flamingo. So it had to face that direction, quite simply because that was the direction of the light. Then now I've got to paint in a shadow. And if you look at that carefully, it's really not the shadow. It wouldn't quite work like that. And it's certainly, its leg wouldn't be that thick. But I need it because I'm going to put a texture over the top of it, ultimately. I needed it to be a little bit more bold and a little bit more of a characterization of the shadow, because in fact you won't notice it that much when the texture is put on the top. But what you must remember to do is to make the shadow dance round the shape of the stairs in exactly the same way as it would in reality. You quite often will see people will put in a shadow and they won't think about it and they'll just lay it straight across. And then we as photographers go, well, that's not right. That's, you know, and then we get obsessed by the fact that this is inaccurate. So as you do this type of work, you have to create reality, even if it's a really wild fantasy. And you'll see some of those that perhaps merge more into the wild fantasy a little bit later on. So that's the principles of it. But one of the things that I really like doing is bodies of work. And you'll see some of those as we go through this talk. For me, I have worked, or am working, I should say, through the Royal Photographic Society distinctions levels, because what they actually do for us, you go in at the licentiateship level, the L, and that shows that you're a competent photographer and you produce 10 images to show technical ability and compositional ability, etc. So that gets us off ground zero, basically, into thinking about a body of work, but not necessarily in a theme. We're just trying to demonstrate we're a good photographer. Then we go into the doldrums a little while. So we get whatever level we're at, we go into the doldrums a little while, and then we think, okay, I'm going to have a go, because you always think, well, I'm not good enough to do the next level. We are all good enough to do the next level. Every single one of you, if you're interested enough to be here tonight, you have the ability to lift yourself up with your photography and go to the next level. So you go on to your associateship, and you will see my associateship panel in a moment, and then ultimately on up to the fellowship. That's the associateship ARPS and fellowship FRPS. You have to produce a body of work, different numbers, 15 for ARPS and 20 for FRPS, on a theme. So then we have to start talking about statements of intent, which means you start off by saying, what am I intending to shoot? What's this body of work going to be about? And once you've decided that, then you go off and you produce the work. It should really be done that way round, because that way will drive you to producing the best quality panel. If you try and pick it out of your library and you say, oh, I'm going to do it about butterflies in the summer or something, and I've got loads of butterfly pictures, it won't end up being the same cohesive panel as if you start with the intention and work towards it. So I do recommend the distinctions to you. I'm obviously working my way through the fellowship, up to the fellowship for the Royal Photographic Society, and I will get it. However long it takes me, I am determined I'm going to get my fellowship. So those are what they offer, but there are other organisations. It's fair to say I'm also a member of the Irish Federation, Photographic Federation, and I used to be a member of the Photographic Society of America. All of them work with bodies of images in the same way as I'm describing to you, and I've done various ones with different bodies that I will show you a little later on. So this is my associate panel. It's called Dreams. It's actually quite old now, and there will undoubtedly be people online that are going to say, oh God, Janet, we've seen that so many times. I understand that. But there's also some who haven't seen it yet. And it's part of the story for me of creating fine art from content. So when I had this idea for my associate panel, my statement of intent came to me in the middle of the night, and it basically is, I am a person that dreams a lot, and in my dreams I see some images which are very ethereal, that's the top line, some images where they are totally surreal, center line, and the others are nightmares, and there we've got the bottom line. And in this panel of work, I set about to recreate some of my dreams. So I'm just going to take you through them individually very quickly. So all of these are montage work, and even this one, which probably looks as if it could almost be a real image, is still, I think, if I remember correctly, about 4 layers. So not a difficult one, but blending them together to make them look one is the key. I don't want 4 elements in there. I want one blended image. And this was where I started to really understand Photoshop and to use it in this way. The next one, Feeling for Flowers, quite obviously, it says it all on the label on that one. This one's a dream that I know other people have told me that they have too, where you swirl round and round and round and you're never quite sure if you're going to hit the bottom or not. So I'm trying to portray that in this particular image, that feeling of swimming round and round. So that one is quite easy. Now this one is, whether you want to call these fairies or whether you want to call them angels, I really don't mind. But what I want to draw your attention to here is the background, because before I started on this panel of work, I had a half day in my kitchen with a white bowl on the kitchen table, my camera set up with a macro lens on the tripod over the top of the paint, and then I shot bowls of coloured paint. So I'd put in the pink and the blue and the white, and I'd swirl it around a bit and I'd shoot it. And I might add a bit more colour of some sort. Then when I'd finished that colour, I'd wash it all off and do another colour scheme. And these gave me the backgrounds, and I still enjoy these backgrounds enormously. I had great fun doing them, by the way. So even if you just want to do it for the hell of it without any end purpose, that's a perfectly reasonable thing to do, because then you've got them in the library of textures for the future. So easy way of creating your own background textures. This one's the feeling of water. And again, you can see, particularly through the middle here, you can see the paint layer, the paint in the bowl layer in that one, with waterfalls and waves, etc. going on in there as well. Important to keep the colour flowing through the image just as much as it is to keep the composition flowing through the image as well. Now we get on to the surreal area. Now this is where you start saying, good God, Janet, you've really got a crazy mind. Yes, I have got a crazy mind. So for me, this represents, in the top left-hand corner here, this is birth. We're underwater, and these bubbles are coming out, giving birth with butterflies inside them. Now, why butterflies? I don't know. This is a dream, I don't know where this lot comes from in my head. They swim around in the water and they die off into this bottom right-hand corner. That was my dream. And, that's what I had to try and recreate. So as surreal as it is, I can't apologise for the fact that I see butterflies in water in bubbles to survive, obviously. Might be something very deep and meaningful about that lot, but I've never fathomed it out. This one was fun. This one I call Falling Down. And when I was processing this particular set of images, I found that I unusually didn't have anybody with umbrellas in my library. So I shot down to the local town, stood under the arches of the town hall and shot people walking around with umbrellas up. And in the town of Bridport, where I lived in Dorset at the time, they even have puffins under umbrellas and geese under umbrellas. So that was very obliging of them. This one I particularly like because in this one, I am the seagull going over this idyllic island. Now, this is where I'm starting to mess about with scale, and it's totally wrong, because look at the lobster down the bottom here, and compared with the fish in the sea and the, you know, the umbrella, that both the things that are wrong here is the perspective on some of them, certainly the scale. I mean, I've got some shells here, for heaven's sake, but hey, this is a dream. So I can have whatever scale I want in things, as long as at the end of the day, it looks okay compositionally. So I couldn't do anything so stupid, otherwise the image wouldn't look right. Another background here, this is again paint in the bowl. By now I was really having fun this afternoon, because the islands that you can see are in fact cornflakes that I threw into the paint bowl. Then I took the camera off focus and shot my islands and my idyllic scene, and those cornflakes came in very handy for nice little sandy islands. Bluebell wood, hopelessly oversaturated, but in my dreams, they are oversaturated. So the bluebells become vibrant as anything, and the greens become vibrant, because in the spring, when the bluebells are out, the green is quite vibrant, but yes, I've overprocessed it in that way to bring that feeling through. And obviously all the little animals that I'm encountering in my woodland scene have been popped in as well. Now this one is one, and I have to be honest, it's not a dream. What happened was I went along to an RPS advisory day, which is where when you're preparing a panel of work, you can go along and show some of the assessors, in fact, the body of work that you're proposing putting in for assessment. And in this particular slot, which is the end row, the right-hand side on the middle row, I had a very orange one, and the panel went up and the assessor said to me, "You got to take that orange one out because it drew the eye directly to this bright orange image." And when you do a body of work, it's important that you see the whole. We express this as if it's a panel of 10, it's the 11th image. It must make a whole in itself. So it's got to balance and it's got to look good. And having one bright one was a total no-no. So I went home and he said to me, "You've got to produce something there that the colours are going to work across the panel and not jar." So this was created quite simply to balance the colours in the panel. So it's not a dream, but there we go. It achieved the objective because I have got my associateship. This one was a living nightmare because we went to Sachsenhausen, a concentration camp in Germany. And in those days, I had a big Nikon camera with big heavy lenses, and I didn't feel I could go in with that particular lens and camera. It looked too ostentatious to go into this environment. So this was before we had decent camera phones. And so I had a little pocket camera, I think it was a G10, which just took JPEGs. So I took a few snaps, I would say, not photographs, snaps around the place, really for my sake, because I wanted to remember this experience. But it was a very, very emotional experience. And in fact, I suffered for about 3 days after that because I just could not settle. My emotions wouldn't settle from what I'd seen, read, and felt when I was in that environment. So on the third day, I sat down with this selection of little images and I created this image. And that's my homage and my respect to the people that went into that disastrous place and never came out again. So that's a really important image for me and still is today. Now we get on to something that's a bit more fun. I do have a phobia about things flapping around me, and I can dream about it as well. So here I tried to create my fear of these bugs that want to hit me and bump into me. So all I've done now is got some toys from the toy shop, which I photographed, all these little rubbery things that the kids like. And then I have sat in front of a plain wall with my camera on tripod, delayed shutter, and I've taken my own photo pretending to be scared. So that was quite fun. Here we are. This is me in hell. So this is where I go to hell, and you know, there's fire and brimstone and all that sort of stuff. So some of my dreams are really quite traditional dreams, if you like. I'm not saying they're all unique, but they're my version of them. Another one that was difficult to do was this one where I'm drowning. I'm not a very good swimmer, and therefore I very frequently can have this dream where I'm drowning. Maybe that is a metaphor for when I'm overworked, I don't know, but it comes out quite frequently. So here I am trying to recreate myself drowning. So I'd got a picture of a stormy sea, that was fine. I'd got a picture of the helicopter, that was in the library. How do I create me drowning? So I stood in my shower, again with the tripod delayed shutter speed, with the water pouring down over my head in the shower, taking my photograph, trying to recreate my scared feeling of being under the water. But unfortunately, my husband thought this was very, very funny to watch me doing this, and was standing making fun of me from the door, which didn't help at all, but I did manage to achieve a few in the end. So, and the last one's another traditional one. It's the ghost in the graveyard. So that's another traditional one. The important thing I learnt with this particular panel of work was when I took it along to the advisory day, I'd got it on what I call a basic luster paper, the sort of thing that club members use very dominantly. There's nothing wrong with that paper at all. And it's a perfectly good paper. However, what the assessor said to me at the time was, Janet, you need to put this on an art paper. You need to understand papers. You've got to lift it by putting it onto a decent fine art paper. It deserves it. So with his help, because he was actually a PermaJet, I think he still is, a PermaJet lecturer as well, he said to me, try particular paper. So I tried this particular paper, and it is the art silk, the photo art silk. Now it has a nice texture on it and a slight gloss. It's a really unusual paper to use because it goes into the printer and comes out and then seems to cook a little bit, I would say. I'm not quite sure if that's the right expression, but certainly it seems to mature a little bit, and this very nice sheen comes on it and it lifts the image. It's a beautiful paper to use, and it's still one of my favorites today. But what it did for me was it showed the difference, because I could have a luster paper where I printed it perfectly acceptably, and I could have the same print on this fine art paper, and the difference was chalk and cheese. It really made such an enormous difference to my work. So it really started to sell me on the idea of using decent papers, and also really understanding printing and colour management and all the rest of it. So there it is, Photo Arc Silk. I can recommend for some work. We'll come on to how we choose different papers a little bit later on. So what happens with me is I have a little go at something, and I sort of feel I expand my horizons in that direction in photography for a while. And then I think, okay, so what's next? What are you going to challenge yourself to do next? Because for me, I have to keep challenging myself. I want to improve. I want to get to, in my opinion, the next level up. It doesn't matter where that is. And it's the same for all of us, I'm sure, because you won't be part of this group unless you want to improve your photography. Even if you're a professional at the top of your game, we have pride in what we produce and we want to produce it better again. So I thought about this and I thought, well, what don't you like doing? Don't like shooting people. That's interesting. And you've never had a go at doing anything in a studio. Yeah, find that a bit threatening as well. The idea of, can I manage the lights? So instead of retreating, which is a very comfortable, easy option, I actually decided I'd go off and do a 3-day weekend course. And so myself and one of my colleagues from a club that I was in at the time went off and we did this weekend course and we thoroughly enjoyed it. We had an art nude model and we had a couple of fashion models, and we also had a character model. And it opened up my eyes. It opened up a new world for me. And I have to say, I haven't yet moved on from this because I do love working in this environment. I love it because it's in my control. I like it because I'm working with people, which I actually discovered I did like, if only I could get over that barrier of thinking I couldn't do it. And I find that I like working with other people in the image. So it started to give me a different avenue to explore, which was great. The thing that happened on the actual course itself, and this gentleman is a prime example of this, the lights were being set up for us by the professional who was running the course. And this guy was the model, but he was so experienced that he was almost directing us as photographers rather than us directing him, which is what you as the photographer should really be doing. So this image that I show you here, I'm never quite sure if it's my image or his image or the professional photographer's image indeed, because without them at that stage, I couldn't have produced that piece of work. And yes, I had to turn it into a mono and do all the other things which made it more my work, but nevertheless, it very much was a learning curve and a team effort that produced that particular image. So having experimented with being on the course, my colleague and I then started to set about booking models for ourselves, booking studios and learning lighting. So how do you learn lighting? Well, there's a few basics, quite obviously, that you need to sort of be aware of. But other than that, it's move the lights around and experiment and see what you can do. Try different light setups, try snoods, try all the different various things that sit in the studios that we don't know what to do. Pick them up and have a go. Ask somebody what it does. Never be afraid to ask questions because everybody has been there before you. You know, we can't just know how to use this equipment. We have to learn. So if you know somebody who has that experience, just ask them. Most photographers are really very good at sharing information. So take advantage of it and enjoy learning something new. So here I am taking something that's really at this stage was very unusual for me. So I'm going into the art nude world. I'm doing very heavy experimentation with lighting. I was trying to keep the rim lighting down the side here because the black negligee was going to get lost against the black background. So there was a lot of experimentation going on here. And for me, because I consider myself a color worker, even to produce a mono and then to tone it were all challenges to me at the time as to whether or not I could achieve these different effects. So here's another one. This is called Symmetry. And we spent about 2 hours trying to put this particular image together. Lovely model with long legs and long arms, so she could adopt all the shapes that we could think of, basically. And I wanted to get the lighting symmetrical and her pose symmetrical. The lighting we sort of achieved, but we could never seem to quite get it all to come together at the same moment. And so we were sort of moving her legs and her arms a little bit here, there and everywhere, and never quite achieving it, as I say. So in the end, I had a eureka moment. And the reality is, if I go like that down the middle and I flip that side over to there, I end up with symmetry. I end up with what I really wanted to achieve. But in actual fact, I've cheated to get there. I'm not sure if it's a cheat or not, but that's how I produced that particular image. It went on into salons around the world and did extremely well. So I often wondered if the assessors and judges, etc., ever worked out that it was a flipped image or not. But the end result is pleasing. So who minds how I got there? Incidentally, let's just go back to these toned monos, particularly that one is a really good example. The paper that I would choose for this is the burrata papers. They're quality, beautiful quality fiber papers with lovely different surfaces. And there are white base papers and there are warmer papers. A little bit, if you've ever done any work in a darkroom, you know that you would choose different colors and different papers to get different results. Exactly the same for digital printing. There's no difference at all. So the paper that I choose for this is gold silk from PermaJet because it is a warm but quality burrata paper. And so the tones of this particular image work well on that paper. So that's gold silk from PermaJet. Now, I promised you a couple of guys. Here's my two guys. This again, getting outside my comfort zone. I hadn't worked with guys before, and I'd not worked with two models in a shot before. And these guys are a partnership. They are partners. So they're very comfortable with each other. They're not professional photographers and professional models. And therefore it takes a little bit more from the photographer to direct them. A professional model understands where the light sources are and works with you in a slightly different way. But when you're working with amateur models, you have to really direct a lot more firmly. But they were fantastic. They really responded well. And we got some great shots that day. And the fact that I've got one heavily tattooed and the other guy not, that worked very well as for me photographically as well. But what I did find is I found it extremely difficult to photograph the guys and keep it into where I think it's fine art rather than it going into pornographic. And when I'm working with females, or in this case males, I very strongly make sure that my work stays in the way out of any suggestion that it's getting towards porn. Because they've got no clothes on, there can be that suggestion if you're not careful. So I had fun, but I never went back there because I didn't find it that easy or that enjoyable. But the thing that this one says is these guys, I've produced it as a mono again, but you can see it's not got any toning on it. So therefore it's a much whiter black and white. So for this one, I've used the fiber burrata distinctions paper because it is a whiter based paper. So therefore I get the result that I want when I print that one by using the distinctions. Now I've moved on, another experiment. I'm still in the studio with the models. I'm having a go at high key work. So I'm shooting differently in the studio. And then I'm processing it very differently. So I'm using some of the, for me, Irene Freud techniques of putting white layers over the top. I'm obviously changing the exposure when I've shot it. And then I'm using, in this particular instance, one layer here, which is a texture of white feathers. So all that combined is giving me this high key look that I was trying to achieve. And I was experimenting and seeing how far I could go along the road with high key work. So this next one, for example, I've lost into the white background. I've lost her elbows. I'm really quite comfortable about that because I wanted her to disappear into the white background, pretty much as I've achieved it here. People will say it's overexposed. Yes, it is, but that's the style I was choosing to use at that point in time. And this is all, for me, is all about the shapes and the contours, the triangles of the arms. And it was shot deliberately excluding her eyes, because had I had her eyes in there, we as human beings will look at somebody else's eyes. So by shooting her and cutting her off just at the nose level, I've taken that distraction away and I've kept you looking at the composition that I want you to look at, which is the body and the form that you see there in front of you. That type of work I would put onto the fibre-based matte paper. It's a very, very flat paper. If you go back here and you can see that this looks, for me, it just shrieks a matte paper. This look needs matte. So I would use a quality one, and it is a very, very smooth one. So this particular image looks great on that particular paper. So I've now probably exhausted myself in terms of I've experimented with lights, I've experimented with mono, I'm now comfortable working in the studio. What do I want to do now? I'm getting a little bit bored with just having girls and doing shapes with them. I've been there, done that sort of attitude. Let's move on. What does that mean for me? So what am I going to challenge myself to do next? And what I came up with was I actually miss doing the arty stuff. I really like doing this, melding images together and doing it from within my head rather than what's in front of me. That isn't to say when you go into the studio, you don't know what you're going to shoot, because it's important that you do know what you're going to shoot when you go into the studio. But I wanted to create art, not just produce beautiful images. So I went back to looking at how can I start using my model work in an arty way. So first of all, I just was taking portraits and putting on simple textures. And so that's a very early experiment. And actually, it's still one of my very favorite photographs that I've produced. Really like that. When I put this together in processing, I have 1, 2, 3, 4 layers, I think, here. So I've got the original color image of the model. I then produced one layer that is mono over the top, and I blend that, or not blended actually, I changed the opacity down on that so that I just bring through the hint of color, because I wanted her to look like porcelain. So I'm just bringing through a hint of color, but then I clear the eyes completely because it's really important to keep those crisp and to really sparkle. I really wanted the sparkly eyes. So those were masked through. The next thing I did was put on this texture. You could see it's a really quite grungy texture. And people will say to me, do you use blend modes? No, I don't use blend modes. There's nothing wrong with blend modes, but I like masking better. I find when I mask, I get the result I want. If I use blend modes, personally, I don't get the result I want. That isn't to say it won't work for you. It's just my workflow. This suits me better. So I've got 2 layers of the model. I've got one a texture. And in fact, I've got a graduated filter on there as well. You can see it predominantly up here around her black headdress. You can see the purpley colours coming through. So I've put this graduated filter on, but I've still brushed it out on her body to the main, or on her face to the main extent. This one was my most successful image that I have ever produced. And it still amazes me because to me, it's just a very nice portrait. I don't think it's that exceptional. but it was on the salon circuit, and I think we're going back now to 2016, so about 4 years ago. And it was winning lots of medals, and it won quite a few gold medals and silver medals around the world, and including, it must have won in some salon or other, a PSA medal. So some of the salons have specific medals from the specific organizations. And I was a member of the PSA at that time. So the following year, the PSA invite any of their members who have won one of these medals in an international salon to go into the Champion of Champions for the following year. So I received an email saying, would I like to send over 3 prints that had done well in salons the previous year. So print them up, send them off to America, thinking nothing more about it. Never expected to hear another thing, to be honest with you, because I thought, well, they want them, never mind, off they go. And then to my surprise, this one, which is called Rhapsody, won Best Large Print of the Year and was exhibited in the Yellowstone National Gallery. So she really, as I say, was my star, is my star image. It's very, very simple. You'll note, in fact, that I showed you the pretty flamingo pictures at the beginning. It was shot the same day. I've got this mottled grey background behind her. Yes, it's a very nice portrait of a beautiful lady. And then all I've done is added some smoke over the top of it. And again, my trick of a graduated filter. And the graduated filter on this occasion, I've started in the bottom corner and taken to the top. So I've gone across with the graduation. It's often quite more gentle to do it that way than it is to do it from right to left or up and down. So it's just a little trick that I've learned, that the diagonals quite often give a better result. Another experiment, you know, these are single images. I'm not at this stage working in bodies because I'm still trying to work my way through how I use model work with artwork. So this is the lovely Ivory Flame. She's arrived for this booking with this beautiful dress. And I knew that if I used the wind machine, I could make it flow and I could make this feel as if it was an underwater image. So it's called the Siren. So she's the beautiful lady that beckons the sailors under the water to a murky death. So quite a simple one, but the colours obviously are really important for this. And this one looks absolutely fantastic on the, if I say so myself, she says very modestly, on the burrata gold paper. It really does, it's a warm paper, and although these turquoises you could say are not such a warm colour, it just warms the skins and it looks fantastic on that particular paper. So when I'm working on an image like this, I will start to think about what paper I will put it on. I would suggest that, obviously I'm very privileged being a PermaJet ambassador, in that I get to enjoy using the papers. So I have a much wider selection of paper at my disposal than probably most of us would want to afford to have. But what I would say is you need to decide what your style of work is. And I would say you need 3, perhaps 4 papers in your portfolio for your style of work. And if you've got that much choice, that's probably about as much choice as you need, unless you want to experiment, of course, with a wider variety. But I would hone it down and say, right, I want the gold silk because that's a nice warm one that I can put my images that I want a good tone to, but I want the distinctions for things that I want a little bit crisper. So that's how I would choose the 2 burrata papers. You may have a different choice, and that's entirely fine. And then I would have a couple of fine art papers as well. And we'll look at those a little bit more later. So here I am, this is Golden Angel. So again, this looks lovely on the gold silk paper, as you can imagine. This one actually is quite a complex one. I think there's something like 18 layers or something in this one. And I've done all sorts of things with scale and shaping things. So this church is on Portland, but it hasn't got a tall spire, but I needed it to have a tall spire. So, you know, I change that in Photoshop and create that. Obviously the windows of the church, which is on the left-hand side, are far too large in the image compared with the church. So I'm messing about madly here with scale. But at the end of the day, I like to think that it's quite a balanced composition, even though I've, as I say, messed about madly with scale. And obviously taken Holly's feet out of it as well, so that she could fly. Here I'm working with a model that's a ballet dancer. And I love working with models that can dance, because not only do I get some lovely poses from them, but they have the ability to do something I certainly can't do, which is use their body in a better way. So if you want them to relax a shoulder, you ask them, can you just take some tension out of that shoulder? And they just flick and they release the muscles, and somehow or other the shoulder softens. So they are absolutely fantastic to work with if you get a dancer. This one's called I Dreamt I Could Dance. Quite a simple one. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, maybe 6 layers in that particular one. And what I'm doing here is I'm using my white layer to make this ethereal looking background, but I'm keeping the predominant subject down in the foreground in front of that white layer. So it's how you pile them up in Photoshop, basically, that achieves that different look. This one did really well as a standalone image, but you'll see in a moment that is in fact part of a piece of panel work. But this one was a strange happening. I was living in the Netherlands at the time when I booked these 2 models, and they're both Belgians. And what I did is I booked the guy to come to my studio in the morning, and I booked the young lady to come to my studio in the afternoon with a 2-hour overlap, so I could do some images of both of them together. And when he arrived, he was much smaller than I'd thought. I hadn't really read his particulars very well, and he was relatively short. I would say he was probably about 5'6", 5'7". And when she arrived, she was really tall. So what I had thought I was going to shoot, I couldn't, because I needed him to be bigger than her for what I was going to shoot with them. So I had to have a quick rethink, and I came up with this. It's Dion Warwick's Walk On By is the piece of music that influenced this one. So this was very quick thinking, to be honest with you. And so by using them with him standing behind her as he was sort of just walking on by, it worked with this difference of the height. But that was me making an error, because I should have known my models weren't going to work for me in terms of the size. And with this one, I've got a very heavy texture over it, as you can see in most places. Happy to leave it all over him, happy to leave some of it, I'll brush out some of it over her, and even unusually, because I usually clear the face of the model, I very lightly left some of it on her face to create this crying look, because she's done very well facially for me. She's given me a very sad look, but I could emphasize that with using the texture to bring out this look as if she was crying. So that one goes on Museum Heritage. Museum Heritage is quite a strong textured paper, and this particular one looks great on that paper. As a standalone image, it worked well on that paper, but I'll come on to where I used it in a panel, and because it was then used in a panel, it had to go onto a paper that the entire panel would work on. So it isn't always printed on Museum Heritage. It depends how I'm using it as to which paper I will choose to put it on. So Museum Heritage, very nice, very coarse, lovely texture, beautiful texture on that one. So let's just have a little pause and consider some of the issues around putting together these montage images creatively and convincingly. I talked at the beginning about how I have to put these together in the way that I'm showing you. And I also talked about how you've got to look at the various elements of the image so that you make sure that you keep all the light working for you from the various angles that you're looking at it. So it really is important that if you want to create fantasy, that you think about all the things that have got to come together to make it look like reality and make it comfortable for the viewer to look at. So let's move on for my final 4 years worth of work. Rather like my dreams, I do have quite a strange head, and I've learnt about it since I produced this body of work, ironically. When I hear music, I actually can't not see an image. So I thought everybody saw pictures in their heads when they heard music, but apparently they don't. But it took me until about 10 months ago before I realized, or somebody told me, in fact, that what I have is something called synesthesia, which means that I combine different senses together. So if you talk about my grandmother and her bathroom and carbolic soap, I can actually smell that soap in my head. I can actually smell the soap. And in the same way as if I hear music, I see images. So again, rather like my dreams, I decided that what I'd do is I'd choose some pieces of music that were significant to me for one reason or other, and I would play the music, and I would try and produce a body of work based on all my pieces of music, inspired by music is exactly what they were called. It went in initially, this panel, I produced about 30 of them. It took me 4 years to produce this body of work because although I had some elements in my library, I had to really shoot the models exactly, or most of them. There's one or two that I took out the library, but most of them I had to get particular emotions coming through. So I really had to set about producing this quite from scratch, and thinking about what am I trying to achieve here? I can see this image, but I need all these component parts to make it work. So it took time. It took time, and it took quite a lot of money as well, because obviously I've got to book these different models and I've got to book the studios. So I did have a small studio for myself, which I could use for some of the work, but not for all 4 years of it. So let me take you through it. The first thing that I did with this selection, these 30 images, I pulled them together for the gold of the PSA. So their system is very similar to the RPS. And instead of calling it a fellowship, they call it the gold level. And they ask you to produce 4 lines of 5. And it must not be, when you read the rules, it says it must not have been shown as a panel previously. So therefore I had to put it into the GPSA, into the PSA first for the gold, because otherwise it broke the rules. I then went on and did a slightly different arrangement, or no, a fairly different arrangement for the Royal Photographic Society, where unfortunately it didn't pass, but I am still working on it. And then I went back for the Irish Photographic Federation and presented the panel that you see here before you for their fellowship. And I'm pleased to say it got its fellowship in Ireland. The difference that I did between presenting it in the RPS and the Irish Federation, 1 or 2 were modified slightly where I felt they could be improved, but I didn't ask the selectors, the assessors, to hear the music. With the RPS, I asked it to go up for each print that went up, had a 10-15 second piece of that music. So the next one would go up and the next piece of music would be played. And some of the feedback that I got was that they found the music distractive from the images. So this time, when I've reworked this body of work and I resubmit it, they won't be getting the music. They'll have to try and work out for themselves what it is. So This is a piece of piano music. It's called Fairy Love. And this is my creation. This is what I see. I am actually using the models to represent me in these images because they're far more beautiful than I am anyway. And I can get beautiful images by using these lovely ladies. Just out of interest, what you see here is these purple flowers. This is in fact a poppy field, which has had all the hue and saturation changed on it so that it works with the overall. So never be afraid to change colours, change shapes, whatever you fancy, just to make the piece of artwork finished. This one's, I've forgotten the name of this song. Anyway, oh, You Raise Me Up. You Raise Me Up, this is called. Again, this model we're using in the studios a wind machine to pull her dress out for me. And I really wanted this strident look on her. And the face of God over here, in fact, was a plaque that goes on a wall in a garden, which I shot in the garden centre. So, never be proud. If you see something that looks attractive, take its picture and sit it in the library. It may never get used, but when it comes out, you've got what you need. Stranger on the Shore, this one. This was shot actually with Fredo in my back garden. She'd come to stay with me. And so it was shot in natural lighting in the back garden. But I knew exactly, we were playing the music, I knew exactly what we needed to create. And that's the key, knowing what you're going to create, knowing with this piece of artwork, what you want your ultimate piece of work to look like. White a shade of pale, purple harem. And again, I wanted this ethereal, quite cold look from the model. She's normally very friendly. You've seen some other photos of her tonight, and she's really quite a soft, beautiful lady. But I wanted this cold look from her. And by getting her to look direct into camera, giving her the black gloves and the fairly bright lipstick, it gives her that assertive but cold look, which we were trying to achieve. This one is a piece of meditation music. It's called the Spiritual Birth. Now, I had found this piece of graphic wall painting in Eden, down in Cornwall, and it always fascinated me, this shape. And I do meditation, so I could sort of feel this one happening. And the piece of music, as I say, felt exactly right for this background. So what I did with this one is basically I shot it round the other way because I already had the background and the music. So we had to try and create for the model that these Isis wings, which is what you're seeing here, were swung around as she was posing so that hopefully we could get it into this shape that matched the background. It took quite a lot of tries, but we achieved it in the end. This one's for your eyes only. And this again was taken the weekend that Fredo came to stay with me. Natural light on the lounge floor in my home, with me on steps above her looking down. And we were adding, oddly for me, because obviously I could have added all these little bits in Photoshop, but we actually were trying to make this composition for real. So none of these little pieces of fluff and feathers and flowers and headdresses, etc. They were all there for real. The only thing I've done to this one is add a texture over the top, and it's quite a heavy coloured texture. So I've kept it heavy around the edges, but I've cleared it from her face. But I'm quite happy to let it lightly go over the body where it suits me. Bridge Over Troubled Waters, that one. Again, I had most of the elements of that one in the library, so it was just a question of getting the right melancholy sort of look from the model on that one. This one was the most difficult one. This is Je ne regrette rien, Edith Piaf, very strong piece of music. And I tried to shoot this with 3 models prior to using Ivory Flame. And every time I'd get back and I'd put them into my computer, I'd find I hadn't got exactly that hard lofty look that I really wanted to achieve. And again, she was staying with me over in the Netherlands, and we were shooting other things at the time. And I told her about my problems trying to get this one. And she said, oh, I can do that for you, no problem. Now, she usually does quite gentle, drifty sort of things. You'll see another one of her in a minute. So to have her looking vampish like this was quite unusual, but bless her, she did it for me. And so full-time lucky on that one. This was a model I loved working with, Stephanie. This is Eurythmics. Sisters are doing it for themselves. And she really got into this. She loved the fact that we were working with music. And so we were sort of more or less dancing around the studio, her and I, as she posed and I'm suggesting ideas. And we had great, great fun. I'd work with this model again any day. She was super. There's the one that you've seen already, Walk On By Dion Warwick. This one's Windmills of My Mind. And with this one, I've morphed the face of the model here. Why did I do it? I don't know. I just thought I wanted something a little bit weird for this one. So I've made it even more weird by changing the proportions of her face. This was a trick I learned from Ricky O'Neill, a photographer and artist that you may know, a Scottish guy. And he does a lot of facial morphing on his models. And so it was a technique that I took inspiration from. I don't do it quite the same as Ricky, but nevertheless, I took the inspiration from him. Bananarama, Walk Like an Egyptian. This one, I was fortunate enough that I did have all the background stuff. So it was really just a question of shooting the model to complete that particular one. Again, you've seen this one already in a different format. This is Tom Petty, I Won't Back Down. But so the things that I had to do here is this particular background is the words say, I won't back down. You can stand me up at the gates of hell, but I won't back down. So this is my gates of hell and my model standing there. And the fire was taken at a bonfire party or something like that. So I did have to create that one pretty much the background for that, but not the model because I already had that shot. But note in this one, I've got a quite heavy coloured, liney texture over it, which I'm quite happy to take into her. It even comes slightly across her face in a very gentle way, and then across the body as well. Probably a club judge wouldn't like it, but I do, and it's my art. This one you've seen in the advertisements for this. This is one of my favourites. This is Entrance of the Queen of Sheba. I really enjoy working with models with black skin because the light works differently on them. And so I've had a couple of sessions with different models, but this particular girl, she could do this grand entrance that I was looking for. So I had to send for those Isis wings, those gold Isis wings from China. And I had already got the chiffon stuff here, this tulle that I've draped around her. So that made the costume work. The most difficult thing I had with this particular one was finding the right background. I wanted this big open cathedral look, and most cathedrals have a rood screen which stops you having this wide open space, which I was looking for. But this is shot in Peterborough Cathedral, where they have no rood screen. But the problem that it has, and you can still see some evidence, but you don't notice it unless I point it out, is because it was just open to the public that day. First of all, I had to make sure there was no public in the picture, but they also had the carpets, which obviously automatically roll out across this flooring, rolled back. So I guess they just want to protect them in a way. And there was another big roll of fabric across here. So this involved me having to rebuild these steps and even rebuild some of the mosaics down here to make that image work. And my images don't usually take me very long to process, but it must have taken me about 3 hours to rebuild this part of that particular image. Here we are with Ivory Flame, doing what Ivory Flame does best, which is looking really gentle and beautiful and dreamy. So this is the traditional sort of photo that you would expect to get from her. This is Johnny Dankworth, piece of jazz, take 5, okay? So this is a lovely, smooth, creamy piece of jazz. And so I've really tried to emphasize that by putting this swirl of cream on it to get that feeling of movement and to get that creamy, lush feeling to it. You'll have seen this, some of these dance shots from Kaylee before. I again used that out of my library, and this is Moon Dance by Van Morrison. Here I am with Stephanie again, and this is Jerry Rafferty, Baker Street. Now, if you're a Londoner, you will know that Baker Street Station, Baker Street line is not on the Central line, but hey, you've got to be a Londoner to know that. And the final one is Private Investigation by Dire Straits. And this one, unusually for me, I had to shoot the model with quite strong lighting because I knew that I was going to be using it in an environment that required me to have this darker, heavier lighting on one side and the light coming from the other. So again, I needed to know what I was doing when I shot it, otherwise I wouldn't have achieved the effect. And I couldn't have really created that in Photoshop because I really wanted these very heavy, very striking differences in the lighting on her. But the guy you may recognize from Walk On By was my Belgian guy. And in actual fact, he was walking through my front door. So he was popped into there to look as if he's just coming into the building. So I don't know if you know if it's quite a spooky piece of music, that one. So that's the end of my panels. The panel that you've just seen, I produce on photo portrait white. So it's the PermaJet portrait white paper. It has a very slight texture to it. It's fairly matte, but it suited the breadth of the things that I was producing there. I probably could have put it onto the Photo Art Silk just as successfully, but I couldn't use the, for example, the one that you saw that I said I put on museum paper. I couldn't have put it on there because some of them I wanted quite soft. So for your eyes only, the portrait of Fredo on the thing would have looked so wrong on that particular paper. So I had to think about a paper that would encompass the whole lot and they would all sit on comfortably. And I have to say, in fact, probably Portrait White is my favourite paper of all the PermaJet ones, because for my work, it works really, really well. So I would have in my portfolio of 4, I'd have the two Baratas that I've said to you, Portrait White, and I would have Photo Art Silk because they suit my work. But for you, it's up to you to decide what works for you. What I would say, in just rounding off, is if you want to produce fine art work, you really seriously have to use decent papers. You have to use the fine art papers to just deliver that finishing quality that your work deserves to have. So don't short circuit yourself. You know, we don't stop when we want to buy a new camera or a new lens and think, that's a bit expensive, or maybe we do. But, you know, we're fairly extravagant people as photographers, let's face it. So don't skimp when it comes to the printing. Really use those papers to add that difference to your particular image. And what PermaJet have done, I've talked to you a little bit about some of the papers that I use, but what they've done is they've produced a very good video called The Knowledge. And this helps you to understand what the different papers do in their range, and it will help guide you as to which paper might work for you. So that is actually on SheClicks, and it's within the She Benefits section. And then you can link on to this video and watch The Knowledge at that point. And then you can decide, yes, this paper or that paper might work for me. And then they offer you a discount. So this is only available for SheLink members. So if you're here tonight not as a member of the website, I would say to you, very good reason to join. It doesn't cost you anything to join the SheLinks website. And then you're a member, and then you qualify for the 20% discount. And you'll find again under the SheLinks benefits that you would find this discount code that will give you the 20% off the PermaJet papers. So I would say have fun, enjoy them, and learn the difference that a decent paper can make. So thank you very much for listening to me. I would now hand back to Angela.
That was fantastic, Janet. Thank you very much. You have a very rare honour of being the first person to present a webinar that got banned by Facebook for SheClicks.
I am so sorry. I never thought that. You see, to me, what I produce is not in the least bit offensive.
No, I don't think it was either. And we have lots of questions and some really interesting questions as well.
Excellent. So, right. So let's fire away.
So Anushka has asked, how would you recommend learning Photoshop? There are lots of basic courses and thereafter there's so much choice. Where do you start?
Okay, yes, it is. It really is so confusing, isn't it? What I would say to start with, and I should have probably said this during it, there is no right and wrong way to do things. There's your way. So I learnt by literally going onto YouTube. I'd think, oh, I'd really like to learn how to do masking. Let's take that, for example. So you find there's masses of information on there about masking, and some of them you just don't seem to respond well to as presenters. Maybe you don't like their accent, maybe you don't like their presentation style, whatever. But you find one that works for you. And then what I tend to do is I will have it on my iPad. So I will run that on my iPad and I will work my image simultaneously. So I will watch a little bit, stop it, find where all the positions are on Photoshop, copy it, do whatever I've got to, and then move the thing on so that I learn the next bit. But the key is, so you've now learned how to do masking, but if you don't keep doing it, you forget. So you do have to keep practicing and you do have to keep using these techniques, and you'll find some will work for you and others, and I give you the example in the talk that for me, blending modes just don't do it for me. And people want me to use blending modes so frequently. And I think, no, I'm quite happy, thank you very much, doing my masking the way I do. So do what works for you, learn the tools you need to, and don't try and learn it all at once because there's far, far too much. And there's loads of stuff you'll never use anyway. So whatever suits you.
YouTube's got very good now at kind of finding what you want from a specific piece of video as well. So if there's a a half-hour video and you type something in, it will often pull you to a relevant few minutes, which I think is really great. But I think your advice about using your iPad or your phone or whatever is a really good one.
Yeah, or laptop, really anything,
don't you?
Yep. Okay. And I am self-taught. I haven't had any tuition that I haven't done just that way, really.
I think, yeah, that's a good point, because often when you do a course, it will introduce you to the whole of Photoshop and the various concepts, which is great. But there's always, you're creating art and you want to do something in a very specific, or you've got something very specific in mind, and it's not necessarily one of the key stages that they're going to teach you.
Yeah.
Okay. A couple of people asked, which printer do you use?
I've got an Epson at the moment. I've got an Epson P600. Which will print up to an A3 plus. If I'm honest, I wished I'd bought the 800 so I could produce something at A2. But on the other hand, how often would I have wanted to produce something at A2? I'm not so sure. So it's a very good printer in so much that it has, she says, looking in the top quickly, it's 9 cartridges of different colours. And the important thing about a photo printer are the blacks. So you have 4 blacks effectively, because you've got one that is either the matte black or the gloss black. So you're never using both of those at the same time. It's one or the other, depending on what paper you're printing on. And then you've got a light black and a light black. And those are what give you the gradation, the general, very gradual gradation that we're looking for, particularly in the mono printing. And then all the other cartridges, as I say, are separate ink. So you've got the ability, if you've used loads and loads of yellow, then you just replace your yellow. I use a PermaJet continuous ink system. I don't use the Epsom inks. Just don't tell them. And in all honesty, I get fantastic results with my Epsom, with Epsom with the PermaJet ink. Why would I want to spend out on Epsom inks?
Absolutely.
So there we go.
Sheila has asked, who was the PermaJet lecturer who suggested that you print on fine art paper?
It was Lee Preston. I am friends with Lee since. At that point in time, he was a god as far as I was concerned. But Lee was the one that put me on to the PermaJet.
Okay. Is there a printing workshop that you would recommend?
Well, PermaJet do a really, really good one. They've got lots of courses in that they offer you. And in fact, I did do the PermaJet print course, and Lee was at that time, I don't think he does it anymore, but Lee was the lecturer at that point in time. So the important thing to really understand is colour management. I'm going to be really sexist now. I tried colour management to learn colour management 3 times. And the first 2 guys, I think they'd got big egos or something, because they made it so difficult to understand, so technical to understand. And the reality is the basics of it are not that technical at all. You need to understand the profiling, you need to understand how to read the profiles on the papers, and it's not complicated, but it is fundamental to being able to achieve a good print. So, and the PermaJet course takes you through that, and eureka, I understood.
That's great. And this kind of connects with a question I was emailed, which is about how do you adjust colours properly before printing. What I was going to say is Janet's presentation tonight is part of a set of 3, or a series of 3 webinars that PermaJet is going to be sponsoring. The next one is going to be going into more depth about paper selection and you know, how you look at your images and consider what papers you would like to use. And then the one after that, which will be in February, is about it's about profiling basically, and how you profile your so I'm going blank now. Profile your monitor and also profile your paper to make sure that what you see on your monitor is what you get out of the printer. So we'll be covering those, but also it sounds like PermaJet runs some great courses, so it might be worth looking into those as well.
Yes, and in all honesty, I reckon these days, because I'm profiled, that what I see on, I don't have to do much testing, because what I see comes out of the printer. Yeah. Once you know which knobs to twiddle.
So you might spend a bit of money on a profiler for your monitor, but PermaJet does the profiling of the paper and printer for you for free.
Exactly. So you'll learn all that.
You'll save money on your papers in the end, because you won't be producing so much that you want to throw away and tear your hair out. So
absolutely.
We've got another question. It's about the RPS assessments. Do you actually have to physically go to a licentiate or other qualification?
No, not at all. You don't have to be a member to enter a licentiate body of work. You don't have to be a member. However, what you do have to do is, if you present your work as a licentiate, as a non-member, when you are successful, which we would hope you would be, you then have to become a member to use the letters after your name. And that is, you know, why wouldn't you? If you've got your letters and you want to use them, that's fairly normal in professional, other professional organisations as well.
Oh, right. We've got almost a philosophical question now from Katie. Is Adobe Photoshop worth it?
Is it worth it? I will be honest and say I started out with Photoshop in legal copy donkey's years ago. One of my friends gave me the legal copy. You couldn't do it now, could you? Because they've made sure that we can't, because it's all on the cloud. So I started out with it. I think if I was honest, now I would say I could probably do just about everything in Elements that I do. And Elements is a hell of a lot cheaper. But because I'm so embedded now with Photoshop, I just don't bother to move on. I don't bother to try and find a difference. I have this feeling, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. And it works for me. And I'm willing to pay the money, so therefore I choose to use it. But I think, Katie, it is a good question. Is it worth it? Depends on what type of work you're going to do. If you are doing work, there's an awful lot you can do with the raw converter to balance colors and to change elements of it. If you want to do manipulation, though, which is really what I've been showing you today, you've got to use either Elements at the lower level, but it takes you a hell of a long way into learning. And then maybe if you really find you enjoy it, invest in Photoshop at that stage. Is that a reasonable solution?
Well, I would say it is. I mean, when you were saying that you used an illegal copy of Photoshop many years ago, that was when Photoshop was probably £700 or more. So it was a massive thing. And when there was an upgrade, it was, I think, £200 or £300.
Absolutely.
So it was a really serious thing. I think it's important with Photoshop. I mean, there are some great alternatives. Photoshop, I think it's, what is it, £9.98 a month. Some people don't like the subscription model, but I think it works quite well personally. You get Photoshop, you get Lightroom, you get Camera Raw, which is the raw conversion software. And actually, I probably do 95% of the stuff I do using Adobe Camera Raw, but then I don't do a lot of what you do, which is, you know, very different sort of thing. But you can do black and white conversions and stuff. And Adobe Camera Raw is basically Lightroom in a different way, but Lightroom also gives you the organization. And then you get access to a few other things, like I'm a big fan of Adobe Spark, which is a really useful thing for creating little graphics. You get a bit of storage and this, that, and the other. So it's like it's a bigger picture. So yeah, it's a hard one to assess, but I guess if you're not keen on spending £10 a month, not necessarily forever, but for a long time, it does seem to add up. But if you buy, many of these packages are sort of like £60 to £100 every now and again. So interesting one. Thanks for that question. Patricia's asked, how long has your journey taken?
Oh, well, when did it start? I mean, literally, I mean, I probably popped out of my mum's womb and my dad was there with a camera. I've been immersed in photography all my life. I didn't see it that way as a child, but I went in the darkroom with my dad, and so therefore I have some experience of having been in a darkroom as a teenager. And I certainly used to end up helping him and assisting him when he was doing shoots. So I always like to think I learned by osmosis, because he wasn't really teaching me as such. He would just talk to me about it as we went. And then I went into the years of child rearing and careers and everything. So I had a camera all that length of time, but just took family holiday shots and things like that. And then in 2000, I took early retirement redundancy. And at that stage, I thought, I've got time at last. I've got time and I've got enough money. So in 2000, I started to get serious about my photography. And of course, that coincided with the first digital cameras. And I had some of those early digital cameras and I hated them because they had lag on them and all sorts of issues in the early days. So it was only once I got into having a decent camera, such as my Nikons, which I had a series of, that I felt that I'd become a serious photographer. But when did it start? Don't know.
Interesting that you've mentioned a few cameras there, because someone's asked what gear you use.
I now use Fuji. I
Right.
love it. Absolutely love it. I liked my Nikon, and I had lots of lenses. But like the rest of us, it all became rather heavy to carry around. You buy another lens and it still won't go in the bag. So you buy a bigger bag and on you go. And then I held a friend of mine's Fuji one day, and it was like, oh, this is brilliant. This is really lovely. And the first one I bought was the XT10. And oddly enough, I didn't get on with that particular camera. I would go into the studio taking this new camera with me. And then I think, oh, this isn't working for me. This doesn't feel right. So I revert back to my Nikon and I do my shoots on the Nikon. And then the same person bought an XT2, a Fuji XT2, and I held that and it was like I'd come home. The camera worked for me. All the knobs were in the right places and it just felt right in my hand. I think you'll probably appreciate that because you do reviews and you obviously get to feel and look at a lot more cameras than I did. But for me, it was like I'd come home, I'd got the camera that worked for me, and the difference between the Nikons and the Fuji is I've bought it really good lenses. So I have very fast, good quality lenses, and I now get better reproduction than I ever did from my Nikons because I never bought Nikon the very good lenses.
Right.
So there's the trick, buy good lenses.
What I've said to a few people about when we're discussing cameras and kit is that actually there are very few, or I don't think there are any really bad cameras now. Some are better at some things than others. But what is really, really important is that you get the one that feels right for you, because if you pick up a camera and it's annoying you, then you won't look forward to going out and shooting with it. If you pick up a camera and you go, oh, I love this and I can do that, then that's the camera for you, because you'll enjoy going out with it and you'll want to take photographs.
Yeah. And if that's your iPhone, that's fine. Yeah. There's really there's the camera doesn't really matter. It might be a bit difficult to do some of my studio work, perhaps using an iPhone, but I use it for backgrounds and for textures and things like that quite happily.
Yeah, great. So someone has asked, how long did the Flamingo photo take to create in the processing of the final image?
It's quite difficult to remember that particular one because it's quite a way back now. That probably would have taken me a couple of hours. About
so not
a couple
that
of
long,
hours or so. No, because I know where I'm going with Photoshop, I can get there fairly quickly. I've already got the ideas, I've already got the component parts, so it's an assembly job really. So it's finessing the assembly of it. The Queen of Sheba, the one you can see behind me now, really, really simple. I probably produced that in about 40 minutes, that image, in processing time, because it's only 3 or 4 images put together on that one. And again, because I knew exactly, no, I lie. It took me 3 hours to do the cloning across the front. But once I'd done my cloning, it's like wallop, then it comes together.
Okay. Presumably that one uses a lot of your yellow ink.
Just a little.
Kathy has asked, do you only enter print salons?
Not anymore. I don't do salons at all anymore. I had a phase of doing salons when I told you I was sort of winning things, which was very nice and does your ego a lot of good. I stopped doing them because I'm not really, with the salons, you have to have a high impact image that they can judge really, really quickly. And that's not really me. I want to do a body of work and have a theme and work towards that. So where I was chasing all these salons and trying to get all these awards, I suddenly decided, why am I doing this? It's not really me. I'm just chasing the gold medals and things, which I don't need all these gold medals. What am I going to do with them? So I'll just simply work on what I want to do. And I think that's the trick. I now do work that I want to do. And I don't really, I'd like other people to like it, but if they don't, if I'm happy with it, that's what matters most.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Okay, thank you. I don't know whether you'll be able to comment on this from the point of view of whether you've had experience of the other paper that Laura is asking about, but she says she uses Marrett papers and she's wondering what difference she would see if she tried PermaJet.
It's not even a paper I know, I'm afraid. I mean, I would say there are other good papers out there. I have no knowledge of that particular brand, so I'm sorry, I just can't comment on that.
Fair enough. I'm just trying to scan for it. I saw a question. Someone was asking if you use the profiles that PermaJet supply or whether you use something else.
PermaJet profiles.
Okay.
PermaJet papers, PermaJet profiles. It's, in my book, it's essential. And it makes it easy for you because they do them for you.
Well, yes, it does save. It is a bit of a pain profiling a printer.
Exactly. So if they do it for you, hey, that's me. I'll tick that box.
Yep. Okay. Ruth has asked, do your models bring their own dresses?
It's a mixture. Depends what we're doing. Obviously, as I've said before, I go in there knowing what I want to shoot, so I would talk to them. So Entrance of the Queen of Sheba, I knew that I wanted these golden Isis wings, but the model actually, when I described it to her, said, I've got a beautiful headdress that will go with that. So she brings the headdress along, that golden turban that you saw, absolutely perfect. And quite honestly, if I've discussed it with the models, we will find that between us, we've usually got what we need, or I go out and buy it.
I like the wings.
Yeah.
Zoe has asked, how do you set up your library so you can easily find things?
Everyone wants to know that. You've got to find the trick for yourself, whatever works for you. Mine's really quite a simple hierarchical type of filing system. So I have, for example, let me show you. Why don't I just show you? Is that okay?
Yes, of course.
I just screen share and show what I would do. Okay,
Well,
so here's the sort of basic top level of my filing system. So if I'm looking for something that's places, and I know I have a very good memory, which helps. So I know that I've taken a particular shot somewhere and I'll know which country it's in. So I can go into my places, I can go into Europe, and I literally find the country that I was in, the year that I was there, and I move through it that way. Bits and bobs is another one. This is my very favorite one because this is where my textures and my backgrounds and things like that sit. So, you know, I open up my textures file, and as I said to you before, there's a lot in there. Some of them you won't be able to see because some of them are going to be raws and things that still have never been processed. But they're all sitting there. And the interesting thing that I find is people say, how do you choose your texture? The texture chooses itself depending on what you're producing, really. So the filing system has to work for you, and you've got to work out what that hierarchical system is that's going to enable you, your brain, to go, I know where I put that. It's in X. Whatever works for you.
Okay. Yes. Another approach might be to use Lightroom and keywording, but
yes, I don't use Lightroom. I once loaded Lightroom on and it started going zoom and taking over my things, and I'm thinking, no, I'm quite happy with the way I file things. Thank you very much.
Yes. Okay. Joseph, do you color grade your images?
No. I'm very happy with the way I produce them.
Okay. Deborah said, on the music panel, would you put the name of the song and artist at the bottom of the image?
No, not for assessment. They don't like you to do that at all. Right. One or two panels, not mine, but other people's panels, if it is relevant, they will allow a little bit of text on it, but the image has to speak for itself. without the title. So they don't know what the titles are. And no, I don't use the titling on them ever.
Okay. There's an interesting question. Georgina is going for her licentiate early next year, but there are no advisory days because of the COVID pandemic. And she's wondering what they've said to you that has surprised you on the advisory days or perhaps on the assessments.
It's quite difficult to remember now. I know with my fellowship, I got a big tick in the box from the advisor. However, he warned me, and this is the interesting thing, he warned me that what I was doing with playing the music was very contentious. He said they accept music in general with AVs, but they have never seen anybody put music to prints because static and mixture. So he said, you're really pushing at the barriers here, at the boundaries here, Janet, and I think you might ask too much of them to accept the music in the way you want to do it. And so me being the way I am, this is my art, I'm going to produce it how I want to. And so I put it in with the music and failed. So if you do an advisory day, do listen to the advice that you get, is the message there. What I would also say to you is, if you want me to just have a look at your work unofficially, I was, until last year, I was an LRPS assessor. So if you want to contact me offline, I'll see what I can do for you. Okay.
Great, that's very kind. Thank you very much for that. I don't think so. Another question about printing. Does RGB or CMYK mode make a difference to the prints, and which one should you choose?
I always print in RGB. Some people will tell you that the printer prints in sRGB and therefore you should use sRGB. Personally, I find I get results that I am happy with using RGB. The important thing is to make sure that you're getting the right resolution and the right profiles. The other thing that I would say about my work is, if it isn't quite right, because it's fantasy, I mean, look at this gold one that's behind me. If it's an ooch out, who's going to notice? They've got nothing to judge it against. Obviously, if I've got color casts or mono work or something like that, then yes, you know, I'm going to get slated for it, and quite rightly so. But so RGB for me is the thing that I would print in.
Okay, thanks for that. Joy has asked if there's a monitor that you would recommend.
I have an iMac 27-inch and I love it, but it is quite bright. So I do keep it color calibrated, and I do kick that brightness out of it a little bit, because otherwise you think you've got a really bright image, and then when you print out, you find it isn't quite so vibrant as you were. Another thing I would say is, I'm working against a very bland background. My monitor sits in front of a very bland wall. Ideally, I like my wall to be grey, but I've yet to convince my husband we're going to decorate this room grey. So don't have your monitor, whatever monitor it is, and try and buy the best quality monitor that you can afford. But don't put it against a red wall or a big patterned wall, because your eyes take those colours and then you get distortion in your images. Think about the light that's reflecting off your monitor as well. That's another thing that's important. And the last thing that I have, and in fact it's sitting up here trying to illuminate me a little bit now, is I have a light which I bought from PermaJet that is a daylight light, and then I can check my prints under my daylight light, because if we've got halogen lights and these odd lights that we all buy for our ceilings, it can give us again colour variations on things.
Okay, thank you for that. Laura has asked, how do you see your fine art evolving?
I don't know, I'll let you know. As you heard, I get bored after a while and I've got to go off and do something else, but I haven't quite got there yet, so I don't know where I'm going next.
You don't necessarily plan it ahead.
No, no, not at all. It's like, a bit bored, let's have a go at something else. Who knows, maybe I'll become a nature photographer.
Do you save all your PSD files?
Yes,
Work.
yes. Because sometimes, as you've seen a couple of examples here, I will want to go back and reprocess them for maybe a different method, slightly change it or whatever, upgrade it. I don't know. Yes, I change them. I do them all, but I always flatten them and make them TIFFs. And at that stage, I find that the more layers I put together, the flatter the image is once it's been flattened. The light goes flat in it. So you've got to take it back in to levels at that stage to bring the life back into it. But so I usually have several variants of an image, but certainly PSD, a TIFF, and usually a small JPEG, which will be sRGB for using on screens. So that's the sort of minimum that I'll end up with, plus all my original RAWs as well. Capacity's cheap.
Yes, it is these days, isn't it? Laura's asked, with such a large library of resources, are you reassured that you can continue to create work under the current restrictive circumstances, or does this environment pose concerns for you and your future work?
To be honest with you, I haven't had any time to really worry about it this year at all. I haven't created one piece of art this year, which upsets me. But mainly that's because I've moved back from the Netherlands. So from March onwards till now, last 2 weeks ago, I've been involved in moving one way or another and being homeless and all the rest of it. So, and COVID as well means I can't book models and I can't go into studios. And so it's just like, it's just not happening at the moment. So we won't stress about it. I'll just let it roll. And then I'm beginning to get back into the feeling that I've got time to do something. So when COVID allows me to book models again and get into a studio, I will.
Okay. And speaking of models, someone has asked, how do you go about finding a model, and could you give an idea of what you'd actually pay them for a shoot?
Yeah, sure. Purple Port is a website where you can see and book models through. It's probably, there are others, but the Purple Port is probably the liveliest, the most active of the portals. So the models put images up, the photographers put images up. And so if I put a picture of Freda up, then I label it as her, so other people can see what she can do in the way of how she interacts with us. Models come in different levels, so you can get some free ones. So if they're just starting out, then you can usually do work in terms of they will sit for you, and then you give them images for their portfolio, and it starts to build them up. So particularly if they've looked at your work and they think, well, I'd like to have some work in my portfolio from that particular photographer, they'll contact you and offer to do work for free. What I would say is I have used some of these girls. I never get my best work from them. It doesn't matter how well you direct them. They haven't yet learnt the real confidence of being a photographic model. And my best work, unfortunately, comes from the expensive models, because they are the ones that know what they're doing. Take my picture of Freda in Rhapsody, for example. She knows that I'm taking a portrait of her. She understands where the lighting is, because that's the professional level that she's working at. She also knows that her nose shouldn't go outside the profile of her cheek. It's difficult to show with glasses on a bit, but if the nose breaks the cheek, it looks like a sort of bump on the side of the face. So you ask the model to turn the head back just slightly so that it stays within the profile of the face. If you work with a model such as Freda, she knows that, and she knows the relationship between her and the lighting and her nose. So you don't have to give that direction so much. Work with one of the other models that's not so familiar, then you have to work doubly, trebly hard to get any good results from them. They cost different prices depending on where they are in the scale and etc. If you want to get into it, one of the easy, less expensive ways, some of the studios offer days where they'll have a model there and you can book them for an hour or 2 hours. So the model stays there all day. So you're all sharing her travel expenses. And so you just book for an hour or 2 hours or whatever you want. That's the least expensive way to go into trying models. You can pay up to a couple of £100 for half a day with some of the top models.
Yeah.
So okay. It's not a cheap game.
Okay. Helena's asked, what calibrator would you recommend? I think she's talking specifically about the monitor.
Okay. Well, I've got a Spider, but in all honesty, I've seen other people's calibrations. I actually think they're all much of a muchness. As somebody that reviews these things, Angela, do you agree with that?
I've got a Spider too.
You've got a Spider too, right? I have a Spider and I'm very happy with it. And when I upgraded, because my Spider was really, really old, I still upgraded to Spider because I was happy with it.
Yeah.
But, you know, Colour Monkey and the others, I don't know, but I have friends with them. They get good results as well.
I think, as you said earlier, it is important to bear in mind what your surroundings are like. So there's a reason why I made my office kind of white, grey, black.
Yep. Because
you want to keep the colours from bouncing around.
Yes.
So some coloured lighting on the background, but I would never edit with that on there.
No, exactly.
And then Laura, as a follow-up, has asked, how do you profile a printer? And that's slightly different. Is that something you've done, or?
No, I don't. I have my papers profiled by PermaJet. So what you do, and you're going to learn this on one of the other courses anyway, but if you want a new paper, you've got a new paper, so you've bought Portrait White, and you download a piece of software from PermaJet, and it runs, you have to take off all the color management on your printer, and it runs a test print, which is really a page with loads and loads of different colored blocks on it. You send it back to them, they run the profiling on that, and then they send you back a piece of software that goes into your computer, which means the colors have been corrected, because my printer, my P600, will be different to somebody else's P600. So it's corrected for my printer at that time with that paper, and you then use that appropriate profile. So you don't have to go into the workings of the actual printer itself at all.
No. And so what PermaJet does is the really dull bit. They've got an expensive piece of kit which basically measures the color of each of the squares, and you have to move them along very carefully, and it's all a bit boring. So that's how they produce the bit of software that you need, or the profile.
But if you buy the paper from them, you get that custom profile for free.
So it works out a lot cheaper than
absolutely
buying.
And
probably
easy.
Don't use that many papers.
Well, like I'm saying, 3 or 4 papers. I think each photographer probably needs about 3 or 4 different papers in their portfolio for their work, whatever that is.
Pat has asked, what is your favourite lens?
I have a 90 f1.2, which is my favourite lens because it's a lovely portrait lens and lovely and crisp. So that's my favourite lens.
Okay, thank you. And then final question, someone's asked, does it make sense to try these papers on your typical multi-purpose printer? So something that it's probably got a scanner built in, and it does, you know, prints your letters and that kind of thing.
No, don't waste your money. What PermaJet do offer, it's not on the 20% discount, but what they do have is test packs. So there's a test pack for burrata papers, there's a test pack for smooth art, there's a test pack for textured art. So you get, I think, about 2 or 3 of each of the ones in that range. And if you're thinking, well, I'd like to have a textured paper, but I don't know which one, and you can't work it out, then you can have one of these boxes and sort yourself out that way. But you really and truthfully, if you're going to start printing seriously, you've got to buy a serious printer. Otherwise, you're wasting your money on your printer. I have 2 printers. I have a cheap one, which is my everyday letters, junk stuff that I want to print, and then I've got my photographic printer, and that's exactly what that gets used for, and only that.
Yeah, yes, that makes sense, because you don't want to be spending money on nice paper and ink and then just printing a letter. So.
Cheap paper, cheap ink goes into the other one.
Okay, well, that's the end of the questions. Thank you, Janet.
Okay,
it's been a really interesting evening. Everyone's there's lots of thanks and people saying how inspired they are. So thank you very much for stepping in and giving us your presentation.
You're very, very welcome. Thanks then.
Bye-bye.
Good night, everybody.